Small group coaches are important because they guard the vision of small groups in the local church. So part of your task is to help keep your small group leaders on target by continually reinforcing the essential disciple-making mission of small groups. And so that's what we call our first principle of small group coaching, is to keep leaders on mission. Now, as you do that, the first task you want to consider is that you need to cast vision for the win. And Jesus defined what's the win for our small groups in Matthew chapter 28. Jesus came and told his disciples, "I have been given all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given you. And be sure of this, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." So in this passage, Jesus defines the win for all of us in all of our ministries as making disciples. And in the small group arena, then a coach's job is to continue to reinforce that win. See, the measure of success is not just defined by culture, but by Jesus. And small groups often go off path and get off mission when small group leaders have their own personal idea of what the win is, or adopt some cultural idea of success. And if the win is fuzzy, then our small group leaders will never achieve it. So as small group coaches, we want to make sure that that measure of success is crystal clear. When it comes to making disciples, then, that translates into two areas in the life of small groups. Win number one is when members of the group are going full circle in their own pursuit of God. They start by trusting Jesus. Then once having trusted Jesus, we teach them to live to honor God. And then as group members learn to live to honor God, then in our small groups, we want to see them also come to grow mature by helping other people pursue God. We call this going full circle, because as individual members of a small group begin the cycle themselves, they begin to trust Jesus, honor God, and they in turn come around to the place where they're helping others. That's win number one. So the win is not just having small groups or having more small groups. The win is making disciples who make other disciples. And that happens in other settings as well. It happens in families. It happens in one-to-one mentoring relationships. But small groups play a key role in catalyzing this in the life of a church. And so it looks something like this. The coach mentors a small group leader. The small group leader will mentor co-leaders that he or she is training to lead in their group. The co-leaders and the small group leader can mentor the members of the group. The members of the group can mentor each other, but also other people outside the group. And so a small group provides a safe environment for people to learn these skills and to learn this maturity, to begin to get practice at mentoring each other. That's win number one, as people go full circle by helping other people pursue God. But then win number two, when it comes to making disciples in a small group, is when the group itself goes full circle by reproducing other groups. There's a startup phase where you're just getting going and getting organized. People are building trust and getting to know each other. And then from then, there's a phase where you're growing together. The group members are finding their gifts and beginning to serve and mentor each other. And then ultimately, the group goes full circle when it reproduces. A new group or groups are formed or given birth out of that group. That's the second win. Because when those two things are happening on an individual and on a group basis, they catalyze each other toward making disciples. When members of the group are growing in their capacity, becoming mature and mentoring other people, that's going to push the group forward toward reproduction. And when the group is moving forward, that's going to draw individuals forward to help them grow in their faith as they have to step up and take leadership. And so part of your goal as a coach of small group leaders is to keep this in mind all the time, to keep helping your leaders move toward that vision. You cast vision for the win, and you help them always keep moving forward toward making disciples who make disciples and toward reproducing their group. That's all part of casting vision for the win. Now here we are. The first principle we said is to keep leaders on mission. And the second thing in order to do that is to redirect non-aligned behavior. You see, traditional small group methods, by and large, will not take us toward our vision. And yet old habits are hard to break, and people have learned how to lead small groups in past experiences, in some kind of churches they went to in the past, and they've learned different ways to do it. But some of these traditional methods, as good as they are at doing some things, are usually not that good at making disciples who make disciples. And so as coaches, we need to gently redirect our small group leaders from what might be their default understanding or what their natural way of wanting to do it is, to redirect them back toward our mission, reminding them, casting the vision, but also stepping in to help them understand what we're trying to accomplish and to help them develop the skills and the abilities to go a different direction than they're used to going in the past. And so as we redirect them, then we might also find that the third thing we have to do in keeping leaders on mission is to provide loving accountability. Now, accountability is hard to embrace, especially in a volunteer organization like a church. And your small group leaders are volunteers, and so they might be resistant to receiving accountability from you. And sometimes as a small group coach, we are hesitant to exert accountability in the lives of these people. We care about them. We don't want to have a conflict. We're happy that they're serving. And yet accountability at some level is essential for us to succeed at our mission. And we see this in Titus chapter 2, where Paul talked to Titus about exerting some accountability. You must teach these things and encourage the believers to do them. You have the authority to correct them when necessary, so don't let anyone disregard what you say. Paul is writing to him there to teach him how to mentor those believers, and he focused on three particular things. He said, teach them, encourage them, and correct them. And as a small group coach, you have that same authority to do those same kind of things, partly because, number one, you have been designated as part of your church's small group structure, part of the system. You have this positional authority, but also there's another kind of authority called personal authority, and you gain that partly by how much you know. As you prove to your small group leaders that you really understand small groups and you really know how they work, and you can help them succeed at leading their small group, then your authority in their sight is going to grow. And then the other side of that is how much you care. As they find that you really care about them and you really get them and your heart is for them, then they're going to listen more and more to your authority as you teach, encourage, and correct. Now, when it comes to exercising that loving accountability, then our existing small group standards set the tone for that. For example, in the small group leader training, we introduced the small group job description, and the job description focuses on two key roles that the small group leader has to play. There's two things that they do. Number one is to create a healthy group environment, and number two is to develop the people in the group. And so you're going to teach and encourage and correct based on those two core aspects of their job description. Now, as you do that in their lives, focus on one thing at a time, because any given small group leader might have a lot of areas where they could grow, a lot of areas where the group could improve, but it's up to you to find the most important one and just focus on one thing at a time. Because if you give that small group leader 4 areas of correction or 5 areas of teaching, they'll just be overwhelmed. They won't be able to implement any one of them. So focus on one issue at a time to help them grow. And if you find a small group leader who's not willing to accept loving accountability from you as a coach or to be accountable to the small group system, then my encouragement is that you talk to your pastor, and it would probably be wise to unlist them from the list of official groups in the life of your church. If they're not willing to participate in the system and receive your loving accountability, then they're really pulling in a different direction and should not be promoted in the life of your church. And so here's principle number 1. Your job as a small group coach is to keep leaders on mission. Keep reinforcing the disciple-making mission of small groups. And you do that by casting vision for the win, to go full circle individually and full circle as a group. And you do that by gently redirecting behavior that's not aligned with the mission. And you do that by providing loving accountability to teach, encourage, and correct your small group leaders.